Welcome everyone to a very special live recording of Silicon Heartland Sessions. We're coming to you live from Cloud Nirvana Cleveland. So let's hear it, Cleveland! Yes. Hey, I tell you what, this isn't just any session. We're closing out today with something bold and different. We've brought together an incredible mix of voices to explore one of the most important topics in tech right now. Tech meets humanity, evolving workforces, cultures, and sustainability. Before we dive in, let's thank our sponsors who make Cloud Nirvana and this podcast possible. Rackspace Technology, your trusted partner for multi-cloud solutions, helping organizations innovate faster and easier. Sigma Computing, modern business intelligence for everyone, turning data into actionable insights. Trace3, helping organizations harness the power of technology to achieve real business outcomes. And Varonis, leaders in data security and analytics, protecting sensitive information wherever it lives. We are very, very grateful for their partnership. So, now let me introduce today's panelists. We've got John Paganini, CEO at CrewTracker Software. Thank you for joining us, John.
Welcome.
All right. Jucaitis, Senior Vice President at NextGen Enterprise Transformation at KeyBank.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Nicole, Stika, Senior Business Developer at World Kinect Energy Services.
Thanks for having me.
And, of course, Tracey Forde, Lead Director at CVS Health.
Afternoon.
So together we'll explore how emerging tech, workforce shifts, and sustainability are reshaping the way we lead, build culture, and create the future of work. So, John, let's start with you.
Okay.
You're coming at this conversation from the CEO seat at CrewTracker Software, innovating in a very specialized industry. Can you share how you're approaching AI and emerging technologies and what lessons larger organizations might take from how startups and smaller companies innovate with agility?
Sure. It's not a startup, although it's a very small company. It's been around for about 20 years. So I think to leverage AI, one of the first, I would call it low-hanging fruit aspects that we incorporated AI into the software was we took 20 years of documentation, reference documentation, facts, FAQs, and we fed it into a chatbot. And then that chatbot then became available to the end users in the software. So now, even though the humans, as we've been saying the whole night here, are in the loop, of course, you now have an easy access to 20 years of information at your fingertips as an end user. So that was a kind of a first foray into, how do we incorporate AI into the platform itself and getting not only, our feet wet as a company, but also start to get the user base thinking about, oh, I see how AI is being leveraged or used in an interesting way. The second way that we're incorporating now is this software allows you to export all your data. It's service records, snow and ice management, and landscaping type of records. When did the service occur and what was going on? So you can export that data into an Excel file. So I built a chatbot that understands the how those fields are mapped and the logic behind that. And now you can ask a question: where did most of my services occur? Which ones made the most money? Where's my margins on that? Or which services, should I start thinking about maybe increasing the price? So you can start asking some very good questions. And that's just from Excel file. And now we're starting to look at SQL data as an option. So on both sides of the equation, both us as an organization are learning how to build AI into the product, but at the same time, our user base is now starting to leverage AI from their perspective and running their operations a little bit smarter, just as one thought there.
Awesome. That's a very, very powerful perspective. Now, I'll tell you what, let's zoom out to the enterprise side. Odd, at KeyBank, you've got a huge range of AI use cases, as you mentioned. And you mentioned this tension between buy versus build. And one of the questions actually that came in from the audience was kind of pulling on that thread. So can you walk us through how you make those buy versus build decisions, and how does value stream mapping fit into the way that you think about AI adoption?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think I'll answer a little bit ambiguously. It depends. It depends a lot on where you're starting and the relative maturity of your business processes, what incumbent technology you may have in play already, and what those desired outcomes that you're really striving for are at the end of the day. There may be new ways to get to that end goal that would require you to build a novel application that doesn't exist anywhere else on the market, or maybe you're impatient in waiting for some of your incumbent software providers to bring something forward. Maybe you think that your process has some novel applicability that you're unwilling to customize off-the-shelf software to go achieve. So I think it's really understanding foundationally what your desired outcome is, having some of those frank assessments of where you're starting from, what some of your technology constraints and previous investments might be, and then really going from there, also acknowledging what capabilities you've got in-house, right? I think, we're very fortunate at KeyBank to have a very deep bench of some pretty sophisticated software development expertise. Not everybody starts there. And, at the end of the day, you've got to make that call for what's right for your business.
Agree. So Nicole, John, Tracey, do you have anything to add relative to how you think about this buy versus build decision? I'm really interested to understand how different companies and industries are approaching this aspect of artificial intelligence and transformation.
A couple years ago, we did a really deep analysis on proprietary software that we had developed in-house for carbon accounting, and it incorporates a lot of our energy management services as well. And ultimately, when our tech team did an analysis on what it would cost to bring it into the next evolution, it was ultimately determined that we could outsource or white label something faster. I don't know if I'd quite say more cost effectively, because in the end it's probably on par, but leveraging an external team to help us build something more efficiently and faster certainly was really a no-brainer in the end. And being able to have those plug-in components essentially that their external team is developing at a rapid pace so that we can adopt it as quickly as we can, internalize it, and use it with our clients. It has been really our strategy. Now we're still developing our own processes and tools internally, but leveraging what's out there is just making us get to the market faster than we could if we were just developing everything in-house.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just add to that point. I think about the work I've done with AI startups, and I think about the perspective that they bring to corporations is really helping us with our blinders. Mm-hmm. And so being able to let us know that there are some opportunity gaps in the marketplace that we haven't considered, and gets our head out the sand, and it allows us to have broader approach to our solutions. Yeah,
those blinders, I would echo. That's exactly where what we didn't know is why we've leveraged external.
And it seems like this is almost a partial healthcare conference today. But one aspect of buy versus build is certainly the interoperability, that is the integration capabilities of the products. So if you are going to buy something, one, you should make sure that that's going to integrate with your other tech stack and all the other tools, in your organization. But if you are going to build something, then you've got to think about, well, how is it going to connect to this and that? So the interoperability is certainly an important aspect of that consideration.
Well said. I kind of want to go back to what your talk, Odd. You talked a lot about redefining the human effort, and we all talked a heck of a lot about how artificial intelligence is redefining and transforming the way in which we do business within the context of our companies. How do you determine which parts of a process must remain human, and what guiding principles help you to make that call?
Yeah, boy, that's a fantastic question, and it's one that's really tough to unpack because I think depending on your position or your role, you're probably going to have a different perspective. So just to contrast, like our product team is probably going to target sort of revenue generation, customer acquisitions, cross sell opportunities. Our fraud team is going to target lower loss metrics and more I would say a much more conservative approach in terms of the outcomes, right? So I think when you're talking about distilling down which human effort is really most valuable, it really, I think it requires that big tent conversation where maybe traditional functional silos within your organization really have to align around the mission and the goal and talk a common language about that, because you can't assess performance metrics in a vacuum. You can't assess which human activities are most important in a vacuum. In my experience, you really have to generate first a common understanding of what the goal is, what the intended outcome is, what the mission is, to make sure that you can compromise with your business partners. Maybe a slightly more specific answer. I do think that there is a role for human ingenuity that this artificial intelligence push is going to drive within organizations, especially organizations at an enterprise scale. Some of the most interesting conversations that I've had in the last several years with business partners that I've worked with is asking them those traditional 5 whys and getting back down to those core competencies that maybe become a little bit opaque because of a lot of the systemic cruft that builds up around, people, processes, systems, et cetera. And I think I was just having this conversation in the hallway earlier. I think AI in and of itself is going to drive a lot of really interesting discussions about the most important work that happens and why it happens. And I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah. So just to add on to that, so on the one side, you've got the analysis that you have to do to determine that dividing line between what you want to automate and what you want to keep exclusively human. Working for KeyBank, I imagine there's other pressures as well. You've got the whole regulatory environment that you have to be aware of, which, by the way, seems to me to be very much lagging behind the growth of the technology and the speed of the technology. The other side of the equation, though, that also adds another pressure point is that the technology is evolving so quickly. We haven't really reached, in my opinion, you can tell me if you agree or not, we haven't really reached a point where, depending on the process, you can't necessarily trust AI. Obviously, we all know generative AI is prone to hallucinations and so forth. We want to make sure that we keep the human in the loop. Given all of those pressures, how does that affect, that dividing line?
Yeah. No, I think you've touched on exactly why we at Key have taken a very measured approach to artificial intelligence, specifically generative AI adoption. And I want to be clear, like, artificial intelligence has been embedded in our business for years. I mentioned in my earlier session about the fraud modeling. We're using AI, computer vision techniques for intelligent document processing, check fraud detection. Those types of techniques have been around, but in a very deterministic context, right? Like, it's very tightly bounded to a specific functional domain. It's a very niche use case on a case by case basis. When we start talking about like generalized large language models, generative AI, and inserting those into subjective value chains where it is non-deterministic by nature, we have to go very slowly because, as our CEO, Chris Gorman, likes to say, we are in the trust business. And if we squander our clients' trust, that's irreplaceable. Like, we lose the right to be a bank at the end of the day, right? So I think we are taking a very measured approach, especially when it comes to client-facing use cases, about where, when, and why we put artificial intelligence into the loop.
I was going to say, based on your point, Odd, I think about the importance of transparency, which I spoke about earlier today. And that transparency makes it mission clear that where the areas AI is appropriate and where we need to step in and lean into our human workforce to actually make a better outcome for what we're seeking to achieve. And so I think it's understanding how we're using the technology, where we're using the technology, and where we know there are limitations to that technology.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Those limitations, you have to go in eyes wide open.
Especially in healthcare, trust and transparency. It can't be a black box. And what's so important is having that trust, not only from the clinician's perspective, but the patient's perspective as well. Both sides of the equation have to know that the AI that was being used is being trusted. And Tracey, you had something up there about ambient AI. And Jim, you even started off the conversation by documenting using AI. But the very hot area right now in healthcare is a doctor and a patient are talking with each other. And by the way, the doctor said, is it okay if I record this in advance? And if the patient says yes, fantastic. So it's listening the whole time, as you know, and then you're having an eye-to-eye, you're establishing a true relationship with the doctor-patient, which has been an issue for years and years. And so after it's done, the information is then transcribed, and AI knows exactly, and Jim, you mentioned SOAP. AI knows exactly where to put each of those different content fields into the medical record. So that has really changed the game, especially as it was mentioned about burnout. Doctors are now saying, I can go home at 5 o'clock. I'm enjoying coming to the office now. So AI can be a true benefit in many ways when it comes to the workforce. But if I am finding it quite interesting, if for those of us who've been in IT for many, many years, this is the only time we had to step back and say, where does the human play in this loop? And, we're all saying it has to be human-centered. In fact, I rebranded my consulting business. It's, human-centered, AI-powered. But as I sit back and I think about that, why do I have to say it's human-centered? Why is that being questioned right now? But it is very important that we focus on the human side of that. So.
Well, and perhaps, I think, Tracey, your talk really encapsulated this notion very, very well. What you said was healthcare is facing workforce shortages, rising burnout, and widening disparities, all while digital transformation is accelerating. So I'm curious, what's at stake if we don't lose sight, or if we do lose sight of the human side of the equation?
Well, the human side is where we're going to gain that trust. The human side is actually where we're going to actually have those breakthroughs, because when you have that comfort level between that relationship of the provider and the patient, or in many cases the pharmacist and the customer that's coming into that pharmacy, when you're actually able to close the gap of miscommunication, when you're able to enhance the delivery of a message and be able to have a record of what transpired that's accurate and that is translatable. And more importantly, people can understand what it means. It drives impact, it drives trust, and it enhances the relationship that you have between the provider and patient.
Right. And you also mentioned the importance of building resilient teams. Mm-hmm. What does resilience look like, in your industry?
So I think two areas where resiliency allows an employee to flourish is one, having an understanding of where do they stand today regarding their skills and their ability to deliver the work that they are charged to complete. And then actually preparing them for the unknown. I mentioned earlier in my talk the importance of understanding market disruptors. And so what I have found in empowering any team that I'm working with is that nothing is status quo. So if we are preparing ourselves by being robust in our understanding, continually upskilling our toolkit of knowledge, then we're ready for those twists and turns that any marketplace is going to present to us.
Excellent. So I kind of want to change direction a little bit and kind of go back to what you were talking about, Nicole. There's another side of this equation on the human side, and that is all about sustainability and how we should be thinking about leveraging these technologies, for a better world, essentially. There is in my mind, there's a bit of a paradox here. AI is obviously a force multiplier. for sustainability, but also a massive consumer of energy. You pointed out that AI could drive 160% more data center demand by 2030, and that training a single model can require as much energy as San Francisco uses in 3 days. How do you reconcile those competing realities?
It's definitely a challenge that is still being solved for. Yes, there's responsible use of AI. That there are more efficient ways in which the solutions can be utilized. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be an IT person myself, so this is not my specific area of expertise. But as we are working with clients that are data centers and looking at how they can design their facilities to be as energy efficient as possible, sourcing renewable power from day one, using the right components within the servers and the data center themselves to reduce the consumption, the kilowatt hours that are generating the AI agents and so forth. So there's tricks and tips in which you can do as a personal user, but from a broader infrastructure standpoint, we have a long way to go before we're going to see a transition.
Yeah, I think another dynamic to keep in mind too is, market forces are going to manage demand on the business side. And I definitely want to draw a contrast between consumer AI, so what you would run into via ChatGPT, versus what we, would deploy within an enterprise. Businesses are not going to spend money that isn't helping them earn money, right? Like I do foundationally believe in that, kind of dynamic. And I think on the business side, that's a natural limiter of demand, Nicole, to your point. I think where I'm a little bit more concerned is the consumer side, because as somebody who's followed social media for the business of social media for a number of years, that business model is very intentionally trying to drive engagement through the moon, right? Like there is no limit to how these consumer technology companies are working to capture more time and energy and attention. And I think that is in more direct tension in the consumer space than it is necessarily on the business side.
And perhaps it sets the stage for a question that I think all of us probably have asked ourselves a time or two as we've been using artificial intelligence. When we're in front of a computer screen and we're leveraging OpenAI, Cloud, whatever, how should we be thinking about the impact of the environment relative to our own personal use of artificial intelligence?
Well, we joked about this actually at the break. You don't have to say thank you every time ChatGPT gives you a good answer, because that eats a lot of energy.
But what happens when AI takes over? I think it's going to remember the people who said thank you. I'm just throwing it out there.
I'll build on that. Yeah, so whoever said thank you, they're going to live. So maybe with the efficiencies that AI brings us, it may compensate for the over energy use that could happen, which kind of coincides with, well, there's going to be a lot of jobs that are lost, but there's also going to be a lot of jobs that are gained thanks to AI. I don't know, how that looks on a scale compared to each other, but maybe there are some great efficiencies that will help maybe the airline industry, to come down from 3%, while the AI goes up. There's some compensation there from efficiency. So maybe thanks to AI, we've got better control over our energy demands that can help, balance things out. But that's very optimistic and wishful thinking, of course. Yeah.
Excellent. So I kind of want to bring it back to you, Odd. So, building on this whole notion of AI and we're leveraging AI within the context of the customer experience, there's, a lot of curiosity in the audience about customer-facing innovation. So are you looking at integrating AI into any of your consumer banking products or services?
Again, artificial intelligence is not new in financial services. I would answer that question as like there's already AI embedded in a lot of your customer experiences as a customer of KeyBank. You just probably don't know it. The most, I think the one that I'm closest to and probably most proud of is how we try to protect your money from fraudsters, bad actors. There are many artificial intelligence layers, from identity and access control and how you access your online accounts to artificial intelligence that's paying attention to money movement and alerting when maybe your card got stolen, or where you're transacting. There's a lot of signal around location, frequency, dollar amount that gets correlated and escalated to our servicing department. So I would say that's probably the most likely place that you'll encounter it, and we'll continue to make those types of investments. Absolutely. Right.
And Tracey, what are your thoughts about leveraging artificial intelligence? I know you talked a lot about leveraging AI to uplift and elevate healthcare providers and the folks that are behind the scenes providing these services to customers. How do you think about leveraging AI within the context of the customer experience?
I think one of the things that makes me feel that AI will be really enhancing the experience of that patient journey is that it's empowering the patient with knowledge. And what it allows a patient to do is to dig a little bit deeper regarding a diagnosis, to inquire regarding a medication that they're taking. We have a lot of regulatory limitations in healthcare on how much information can be shared without the physician actually communicating that to you, so it's not misinterpreted, but it gives you a starting point. And I think for any patient, you want to feel empowered regarding the management of your care and your treatment plan. So that's one of, I think, the benefits that AI provides.
Excellent. You also mentioned upskilling as a strategic imperative.
Yes.
What kinds of skills will be most critical for healthcare workers in the AI-powered future, and how should organizations approach reskilling at scale?
So one area that I've at least heard about in a lot of different conferences and see it in a corporate setting is the opportunity to allow our frontline employees know how to approach a patient, how to engage with a patient. And so it gives them a little bigger array of conversation starters. And particularly if you think about when you're working with a nurse practitioner, as you're waiting for your doctor's appointment to start, what are some actual questions that can be posed to the patient to prepare them for the conversation with the provider? And then that information is actually then passed along. So I think it allows our employees to feel more empowered in the work that they're doing, and also better informs the end experience for that patient.
I'm just curious, John, how do you think about upskilling in your...
One aspect of healthcare that's important, since we're talking healthcare, is health AI literacy. That is, the patients themselves need to be educated, one, that it's being used and how it's being used, as well as the clinical side. And with that comes the trust, the transparency, the safety. But I think the educated patient, parentheses consumer, is essential to success as we move forward with AI. So that thought would be, if the patients, and a lot of patients are walking in to the patient exam room with the doctor saying, I found this on ChatGPT. What do you think? And maybe some of the times the doctor is pleasantly surprised that, wow, I didn't think of that or something. But there's a lot of that is going to happen. And to me, that's a good thing. I think that patient empowerment is extremely important as we move forward together as a collaborative effort in the interest of better patient outcomes, basically. And
Nicole, are you tackling upskilling with your workforce as well?
We are, we are encouraging our teams to look at AI from so many different perspectives, from market research to creating the different scenarios under which a client is working on their decarbonization strategy and trying to hit their goals, and tweaking those scenarios at different timelines with different technologies, so that we can look at it from a forecasting perspective, what is going to be most feasible, most economical, in leveraging climate risk scenarios that we are now incorporating just data points from so many different aspects that we didn't necessarily have at our fingertips before. What was taking weeks, months of doing analysis is now getting truncated down to a week. And so the ability to turn that around to a client and say, okay, we've generated now 10 different scenarios for you to take into consideration. Here's what we are suggesting based on your time frame, your budget, et cetera. So those analytics and the predictive modeling has just accelerated our time frame, but the ability to deliver back to the client too.
Excellent, excellent. Odd?
I would say at Key, it runs the gamut. There are a lot of programs available, both from a self-directed and kind of from an organizational systemic point of view. Several of our business units allow employees to pursue 90 minutes of self-directed learning through our portals. That's dedicated time that you have blocked off on your calendar to go upskill yourself. Our Chief Information Officer, Amy Brady, has implemented a program called Tech Ready that is specifically targeting operational folks that have been disrupted, not just through generative AI, but other automation initiatives to really cross and upskill into more of a technology-focused role and get them certified and licensed for kind of entry-level development type work, stuff that they may not have been exposed through other learning paths. So it's something that we support. It's something that we acknowledge very broadly requires a great deal of institutional weight behind it. And one of the things that I value most about being at Key is that acknowledgement of the human effort inherent in our business.
Excellent, excellent. So let's give our panel a round of applause. I tell you what. Are there questions in the audience? Hey, Jim, do you mind coming and grabbing a mic? Mick's got a question. Let's get a few questions from the audience going here as well.
Quick disclaimer, I also work for KeyBank. So there's a context question. And I don't really find so much, at least my teams who tend to be very technical, except for a couple, an aversion to using AI. I think there was initially, and then I think as you start using the value, really it's obvious. But what is your guidance around trying to get initiatives started? Because our required compliance, while important, is a massive blocker to getting anything done, especially in the area. I'm using a BigQuery function called Arima Plus, and every time I use it, I have to go get approval because it's supposedly AI and actually technically it's machine learning. So anything that you've discovered, pro tips maybe?
I'll assuming that question was to me, I'll take a stab at it. No, I think it's a learning journey. In my experience in partnering with our model governance team, the conversation has definitely shifted, I would say, in the last 12 to 18 months. Instead of looking at a model as a siloed entity into more general service functions that are integratable, consumable. And I think that is a shift. That's also a shift. So I think it's not going to happen as fast as I think some native technologists would hope it would. That's the cost of being a bank. That's why we get the privilege of being in the business that we're in. But I do see it shifting. And one of the things around adoption, to look at sort of the other side of that coin, it's got to feel normal to the business person. I see a lot of the panelists nodding their heads, so I'll turn it over to them. But it can't be just sort of, throwing AI at them and saying, hey, go use this, go figure it out. One of the projects that I worked on, we spent a solid 4 weeks in prompt design, just partnering with our risk folks on how to interact with Copilot. So I don't know if any of the other panelists have an.
We've been in the same exact mode of learning and trial by error for weeks of designing the prompts, and then figuring out, does this work? What tweaks do we need to make? How do we adapt it? And then what best practices are we learning from it? And so, as I said during my conversation earlier, our CEO has been leading these monthly forums that he is pulling people from each department to share best practice examples of how they are utilizing AI within their work streams. That while what they're using in finance is not relevant to me, I might still be able to pull out a nugget of information that I can apply to my day-to-day job. And so that has really been a powerful platform for us to be in this constant learning sphere, while also seeking, those professional development areas to find out more. But
can I just add one more question? And I just kind of want to pull a quick thread before you pass it on to John. Odd and Nicole, you both mentioned the importance of prompt engineering. And, Odd, you even, talked about, how it takes effort to create meaningful prompts. And obviously we all know when it comes to generative AI, the quality of the output has everything to do with the quality of the prompt that you're putting on the input. Doesn't mean it's not going to hallucinate. How are you promoting, or are you promoting reuse of these prompts? So do you have like an enterprise or department level prompt library where you're creating prompts and allowing folks to contribute and reuse those prompts?
We are actually starting to create a library in which we are, borrowing those prompts so that we're creating consistency and alignment between teams that have comparable needs, but so that you can borrow and adapt where you need. Absolutely. Those libraries are still in their infancy, but definitely growing.
I think an important framework, to Nicole's point, is what I spoke about earlier, and that's having that governance. What I think about the early iterations of how do organizations lean into AI, it was all looking at your CIO and some type of digital department. And what I'm seeing now is the adoption of having cross-functional teams be a part of that governance, to be able to have some shared insights regarding where they see potential blinders and opportunities to upskill. So I think that governance has been kind of a gold standard for many organizations to be able to make this adoption successful.
Definitely, and a lot of organizations did have governance in place, but now with AI, the governance needs to shift to bring in the incorporation of AI dramatically for that framework and the operationalization of the governance policies. But I wanted to make something you asked, and I think of Metro Health, because Metro Health is, like all the hospitals are doing big things in AI, but they started off early with a small project that didn't have any serious impact. It didn't impact the patient's health or the outcomes. They just looked at, how do we make sure that our patients are going to come to their appointments? And so they built a model just for something that was, relatively harmless in a sense, especially from a healthcare perspective. But they got their feet wet with some simple, let's get started in these early phases of AI type of things. But I also wanted to bring up prompting again. That, of course, is critical. And there's a lot of different methodologies out there for prompting, but I gave a talk to photographers about AI last Friday, and I had a prompting lesson, and this was specific to photography. And so it said, what is the scene? What is the subject? What type of film is being used? What's the genre? And really describe the prompting from a photography perspective. And they all understood that. That made sense to them because they think in photography mindsets, and talking to the AI about how to create an image with that type of prompting structure really made sense. So that structure of a prompt, the moral of the story is it should make sense to your particular business needs as well.
And John, I love that point. And to tie that back to a comment you made earlier about why do we need to be having these conversations now about human ingenuity, it's because for the first time, and I do think this is really novel, we're able to have a natural conversation with the technology that's supposed to be enabling us. And that has, if you've been around business systems before, it's always been, you have to change how you do your work to allow the tool to help facilitate it. And I think for the first time, that paradigm has really shifted on its head, where, hey, I can have technology genuinely helping me in a way that is contextually relevant for my own mental models. And that's a new thing.
Interesting point. Okay, I think we have time for maybe one more question. One in the back. Jim, you got this. And feel free to introduce yourself as well, please.
Thanks. So this has been a super enlightening conversation, and I love that it's in my backyard. So thanks to the organizers for that. I'm Sunny Southern. I'm with Viable Synergy. And I wanted to just ask you all to double down a little bit on the comments related to where you start when you start thinking about buy versus build. There was a conversation or the perspective of you need to start in alignment with where you are. And I think that's obviously really important. But there's two other things I think need to be, or maybe three, that need to be considered as well that I'd love to have your thoughts on. And one is that it's also really important to understand what you want to own. So if you're buying, it's not core to your business, then it might make sense to use somebody else's technology because everybody's going to benefit from that. But if it's the core of your business, you may not want to use somebody else's. You may actually want to invest in building something yourself. Mm-hmm. And two, with the really cannibalization of SaaS, I think we also need to be really careful that the vendors that we choose are going to keep up with the changes in the model. If you tie your core business to somebody else's roadmap, you may quickly move beyond where they are and then be stuck with something that doesn't actually meet your needs. So those are the really two. I'd just love to hear your thoughts on those two comments.
Thank you, Sunny. That was good thoughts. I actually thought you were going to say, instead of buying something that's already in place today, build something to where you want to be and realize your vision, right? Totally out of the box, which is interesting. I'll just give you one perspective, which is one small company's perspective, my software company. The actual roadmap for us is built on customer feedback. So when that is usually for the good of the tribe, in a sense, they'll ask for features, maybe check it out, or I just know it's something we need to do. So sometimes that roadmap for the product itself is thanks to the customer's desires to want to, one, stay with your company, but two, build a better system. So just a thought on that.
And I guess I'd throw something out there too. If there's one thing that I've come to find with especially with generative AI and how rapidly we've adopted generative AI, and as we've thought about integrating generative AI into the enterprise and scaling it, if there's one thing, if there's one bit of advice that I would provide, and I think this is applicable to the buy versus build conversation as well, it's coming back to the fundamentals. I think that when it comes to things like buy versus build, the lens that we look through is probably not a whole hell of a lot different than the way that we did it before generative AI, in my opinion. On the one hand, we have to be really, really, really good at our vendor management, our strategic vendors and partners and so forth, making sure that we're broadening our lens and doubling down on the practices and the governance structure that we have in place for that. I don't know that we necessarily need to create stand-up brand new things that are AI centric, but bolstering the existing processes, I think, is the important thing. The other thing kind of comes at it from an architecture perspective. Loose coupling is critical in my mind. As we adopt new technologies and we integrate them into the ecosystem, we should think about what our exit strategy is, so that if it comes time for us to pivot and move to a different solution, we can do it as quickly as possible, in my opinion. I don't know what the panel thinks about that. Yes, Alfred, can we get a mic? There you go, Jim. You're going to get your steps in today, man.
I'm Alfred Gracias. I'm the CEO and founder of Digital T3, and we integrate AI into digital applications. So end of this, I'm in a number of conversations and great questions, right? So ultimately, it boils down AI. There's only three types, right? So there's embedded AI, which comes from your SaaS providers. ServiceNow, Salesforce, they're bringing AI into their existing products. That's number one, embedded AI. So the second one is built AI, the one that your current data sciences team and your in-house AI team is building. Okay, that's built AI. And the third type is bring your own AI, which is packaged software built on completely generative AI. It's only three. There's nothing else. If someone else tells me there's something else, I'm happy to listen to them. So it boils down to these three things. So when people are having conversations with you, it'll fall into one of these three buckets.
Agree.
And it's good to have a hybrid approach because you don't know where it's going, right? SaaS is getting disrupted, but that embedded AI will get you going today. So the point is, what do you need today versus long term to enable the workforce, right? I can continue on this conversation for many more hours, but I just wanted to boil it down to keep it simple. To end of the day, it falls, many things that we talk will fall into 2 or 3 categories only, right? So you'll cut across all the other stories, drop it into 2 or 3 buckets, understand what you're trying to do, and move forward.
Yeah.
Can I add to that? And I want your input because you know this better than I do. But my experience with it is that part of this conversation, when you're talking about build versus using somebody else's, and in this case, I'm going with the second two, I'm not talking about SaaS, is that combination, the hybrid of the last two is really powerful because you can privatize your data in your own system and connect it to the outside ones so that you're not revealing that data, but you still have access to those. That gives you a lot of flexibility, but it takes care of something else that's not in this conversation, which is the security and having that stuff private. Agreed?
Absolutely. Just remember another small acronym called PACO, PACO. Right? These are the generative AI has many impediments, right? But PACO is the top 4 which will block you 99% of the time. Privacy, accuracy, cost, and ownership.
Right. Okay,
that's it. Nothing else. Everything else is...
I want to just clarify one point. When I'm saying buy versus build, I'm not talking about build foundation models yourself. Sure. I'm not talking about that.
Well said. So I think we are officially out of time. Let's give one more round of applause for our panelists, John, Odd, Nicole, Tracey, for closing out Cloud Nirvana Cleveland with such powerful insights. And once again, thank you to our sponsors, Rackspace, Sigma Computing, Trace3, and Varonis for their incredible support. To everyone here and to those listening later, don't miss future conversations like this. Subscribe, share, and spread the word. You can watch and listen to Silicon Heartland sessions wherever you get your podcasts. And most of all, thank you for being a part of this journey and a part of my tribe of mentors. I'll leave you with this thought. As technology meets humanity, the real opportunity is not just smarter machines. It's evolving our workforces, strengthening our cultures, and building a sustainable future together. This is Silicon Heartland Sessions. Thank you for joining us.